What's up guys, my name is Brian, the owner of Engine Customs and Performance. Today I'm going to show you how to install the ATP high flow catted downpipe on a Fiat 1.4 liter turbocharged engine. Now this install will work on the 500 Abarth and 500T, 500X, as well as the 500L. You can also use this video to install this on your Dodge Dart 1.4 liter turbo. Let's get started. So let's go over the tools you're going to need to get the job done. Check it out. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver, 22mm wrench, a socket extension, a 3/8 inch socket wrench, and a 1/4 inch socket wrench, a 13mm wrench, 10mm wrench, and then a small 10mm wrench. You're going to need a 7, 8, 10, and 13mm socket, as well as a 10 and a 13mm deep socket. And then finally, to make things a little easier, an electric impact. All right, so the first step is we're going to remove a few things out of the way. We're going to start with, now this vehicle is equipped with a Eurocompulsion V4.1 intake. We need to remove this hose out of the way. We also need to remove this ram air duct, and then we're going to pull the battery. Now I've already disconnected the battery earlier, so just make sure yours is disconnected as well. So we're going to start with the intake hose. This requires a 7mm, so I'm going to take my gun, loosen the clamps on both, set it aside. Move that out of the way. Now we're going to remove this duct. It's going to require an 8mm. You can see it pretty much just falls out after that. This is going to give you clear access to the downpipe. And now, make sure the ECU is disconnected. You see these little yellow tabs right here. Push it forward, push, and then it comes right out. All right, we need to remove this out of the way so we can pull the battery. It takes a 13mm. It's a long bolt, so if you have an electric impact, it's a lot faster. All right, now the battery's going to pull right out. All right, now we need to remove this turbo bracket. You've got 2 bolts and a nut. They take a 13mm. Now I've already kind of broken these loose just so I can use an electric impact. You may have to use a breaker bar to initially break these loose. It's gonna slide right off. All right, now we need to remove the heat shield for the turbo. So you're gonna have 3 bolts here, and then you have 2 nuts under here. And we're gonna start with these 3 bolts, which require a 10mm. Even though they look rusty, they come out pretty easy. All right, now we need to remove this nut here as well as this nut over here. Now I use a 10mm wrench on this one because it's pretty easy to access. And then depending on where the engine is on this car, whether it's too far forward or too far back or right in the middle, I either use a wrench or I use a socket depending. All right, so we're on the second nut here, which is the one that's typically a little harder to get to. And because of the position of the engine being a little far forward, I'm having to use a mini 10mm wrench to get this off. But fortunately, once this breaks free enough, I should be able to twist this nut off just with my fingers. All right, now that we got both of those off, this shield's pretty free now. So it's just a matter of working it to get it off and set it aside. All right, now we need to remove the O2 sensor. On the 2015s and above, it's going to be here, and if you have a 2012 to 14, it's going to be right about here. So take a 22mm wrench. I've already broken it loose, so you're just going to use the wrench, and once you got it loose enough, you should just be able to twist it off with your hand. And then set it aside. Okay, now we need to remove the V-band clamp that secures the downpipe to the turbo. So if you follow it all the way down, you're gonna see that there's a 10mm bolt here. So it's a little tricky to get to it. So what I use is I use a 1/4 inch socket wrench with a 10mm deep socket. All right, so I said it can be a little tricky to get to, and it takes a minute. So it takes a little bit of patience. You can only loosen it so much each time. Okay, once that bolt is loose enough, you should just be able to spin it with your fingers. And once that's the case, you're gonna see now I've got movement, but it's still attached to the downpipe and the turbo. So I typically will take like a flathead and just kind of work it around, and you'll kind of feel it pop. And once you feel it pop, then you'll be able to completely remove it from the downpipe. All right, now that we got it loose, make it super loose here and slide it off. Okay, there's one more step that you have to do on the top if you have the stock dual side mount intercooler system. Now this vehicle is equipped with a Euro compulsion front mount intercooler system, so I don't have to do this step, but I'm gonna show you anyways in case you're in this boat. So if you look down here, you're gonna see a 10mm nut. Now on the stock system, one of the intercooler pipes is going to be secured onto that stud with that nut. So if that's your case, then simply take a 10mm wrench to remove it. Okay, now underneath the vehicle, we need to start with removing the skid plate. Just takes a 10mm we got 6 bolts. And then just slide it off, set it aside. All right, now we need to remove the other O2 sensor. Same thing, take a 22mm wrench. Now I've already kind of broken it loose off camera. So just simply, once you get it loose enough, you can spin it with your finger. And it'll come right out. And then just kind of set it off to the side somewhere. Okay, now we need to remove this bolt because we want to loosen the mid pipe because we're going to detach it from the downpipe. So this is a 13mm bolt. Just loosen that. Once you got it loose, you may be able to twist it off with your fingers. All right. Okay, now we need to remove these 2 nuts that secure the mid pipe to the downpipe. Now I would recommend to spray these nuts with some WD-40 or PB Blaster and let it sit for like 5 or 10 minutes just to help break them loose. Because if they have the stock nuts on there, they're probably covered in corrosion. Now these have the copper nuts already on, so it's got a new F system, so it's a little easier to take off. But it takes a 13mm deep socket to remove the nuts. And I would recommend not using an electric impact for these, so you don't cross thread the nut, and then you got to cut the studs off. And that's no fun. One, and try not to hit yourself in the face if those nuts just fall off. Once you get them loose enough, you should just be able to take it off with your fingers. All right, now you're gonna see the mid pipe is loose and away from the downpipe. All right, we got 2 more bolts, and then the downpipe is completely loose. These also take a 13mm, and since you have the mid pipe loose, it's real easy to gain access to them. So just take your 13mm to get them really loose. And before you take them out, I would suggest using your fingers to remove the bolts completely, so you can hold the downpipe still in place so it just doesn't fall. One. As you can see, the downpipe is completely loose now. And so now for some of you, the best way to remove this downpipe is to come down. And for others, it's to go from the top. So we're gonna start from the top and try and remove it that way, but we may have to come back down here to remove it from the bottom. Okay, now it's time to remove the downpipe. Now, there's no easy way of working this thing out. Sometimes it takes me 30 seconds. Other times it takes me 5 to 10 minutes to get this thing out. So every car is different. So what I would suggest is first, you want to get the gaskets out of the way. There's the V-band clamp. And there's also another gasket that's already fallen to the ground, which I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, to give us a little bit more room, since we're gonna pull this from the top, is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the battery tray. It's just gonna give me a little bit more room to pull it out this way. So we've basically got two bolts and a nut, and they take a 13 millimeter. Okay, we also need to make sure that you disconnect the ground wire to the ECU. This takes a 10 millimeter socket. I've already done that off camera. Move the negative terminal aside, and you should just be able to pull this up. Typically have a few wires you got to pull from the tray. And pull it right out. Okay, now we're going to remove the downpipe. We're going to attempt to move it from the top, but it can be challenging. There's no real easy way to get it out from the top. You just kind of have to work it. Almost got it. Just be careful with the studs as you're pulling it out, not to break like the radiator fan. You'll see these studs right here. They can catch on the radiator fan. It'll feel like you can't pull it out, so you just have to watch and twist to get it out. But as you can see, downpipe is out. Okay, so before we install the ATP high flow catted downpipe onto this Fiat 500 Abarth, let me show you what all comes with this kit. So this downpipe, we went ahead and wrapped it in a DEI exhaust wrap and used their stainless steel clamps. That's to keep all the heat in that downpipe instead of permeating into the engine compartment. Now this kit does include 4 washers, 4 copper nuts, and 2 studs, which is going to secure the downpipe to the midpipe. We're also going to go ahead and replace the gasket that goes between the downpipe and the midpipe. I'll go ahead and put the part number in the description below in case you want to replace yours as well. All right, now it's time to put the new downpipe into the car. You'll find that it's much easier to slide this one into place than the factory one. So we want to make sure this is that gasket that fell down earlier. You want to secure it in place. Then we want to take our V-band clamp, slide it over, all right, now mesh the two together. All right, now that we've got that together, what I do is I take the V-band clamp and I squeeze it with my fingers. And then I tighten this bolt enough to where I can still twist the V-band clamp, but it keeps the downpipe secure to the turbo so I can move it and secure it underneath. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Okay, now that I've got the V-band clamp on and it's not 100% tight yet, so you're gonna see here I can kind of swing the downpipe a little bit. That's just gonna make it easier so we can secure everything on the bottom. All right, now we're back under the car and you can see here this is the new downpipe. And if you look closely, you can see it doesn't quite line up with the holes. So what we're gonna have to do is these two bolts are what secure this actual bracket. So we're gonna loosen these bolts up quite a bit to give it a lot of play so we can insert these two bolts and then tighten everything down. So just take a 13mm socket wrench, or excuse me, just a 13mm wrench. Loosen these up a lot, but don't remove the bolts. And then that'll give you the slack you need to line everything up. All right, that should be enough. Now, we got a little more wiggle room to get this bolt in. And all you got to do really is just get the thread started enough. There's one. And then we should be able to line up the other one. There we go. And if you're coordinated enough, you can use two hands at one time. Just make them finger tight. And then what I would suggest is tighten these bolts first. All right, these should be tight. Now, should just be able to tighten these down. All right, now we're going to put these studs onto the downpipe. You're going to have your stud, washer, and then your copper nut. So, we'll start with this one. Just kind of stick it through the hole here. And then you're going to put your washer on. Then you're going to take your nut. And you're going to secure the nut on as much as you can with your fingers. So you're going to see here, it's just going to hang for right now. Now we're going to do the same thing on this other side. All right, now we need to install the new gasket. Now this is a good reason why the studs are loose. So it makes it a little easier to slide the gasket on. But it has little tabs on it, so it'll kind of grab on the threads. So you can push it on there and then let go. It'll stay in place. So now we need to secure the mid pipe to the downpipe. Okay, so kind of secure one stud at a time. Just to slide it through the holes. There we go. Now you're going to take your washer and your nut. And just kind of put them on, just start the threads first. And then we can tighten them down once we have both of them on. All right, now take a socket wrench and a 13mm socket and put it at the top. And then take an electric impact, 13mm deep socket with an extension to tighten it down. Now we're going to do that on the other side. This side's a little bit easier. After you use the electric impact, I would suggest just rechecking it on both sides to make sure it's completely tight. Okay, so now we're going to reinstall the O2 sensor. So my suggestion is twist it in the opposite direction, whole bunch. So you're going to see this is all twisted, because by the time it's threaded in, it won't be twisted anymore. So I'm going to line it up on the threads and tighten it as much as I can with my fingers. And then I'm going to take my 22mm wrench and tighten it down completely. There you go. Alright, now we need to just put the skid plate back on. Just get your 10mm bolts and tighten them down. Alright, now we're back on top. Take your 10mm deep socket to tighten down this V-band clamp. Alright, now we need to install the other O2 sensor. Same thing, twist it first, and then put it in here. Do as much as you can with your hands, and then we'll tighten it down with our 22mm wrench. All right. Now we're going to put the heat shield back on. Now, if you're putting the factory one back on, you may have to finagle it a little bit. Now we're going to get the bolts. All right, now let's tighten it down. Now, one thing I want to point out here, this is a 2015 model. So you're going to see there's this gap here where the O2 sensor used to go. And you'll see now it goes right here, which you'll see the heat shield isn't touching it. But if you can get your hands on a 2012 to 2014 heat shield, you won't have this hole. Or if you want to upgrade to the turbo blanket, order one for the 2012 to 14 model, as all of the aftermarket downpipes put the O2 sensor here. All right, now we're going to tighten this nut down using a 10mm deep socket. This is the only nut that you're going to have on the bottom part, as the ATP downpipe does not have a stud that's over here. So you want to make sure you get this one on just so it's nice and secure. All right, now we're going to put the turbo bracket back on. And my suggestion is to make sure you put all the bolts in first before you tighten them down. Makes it a lot easier. All right, there we go. Put the nut on. And then tighten them down. All right, now we're going to put the battery tray back in. Key is to find that little stud down here. Then you can line everything up. Makes it a little bit easier. All right, we're going to put the two bolts in, and then that one nut. Get the threads started first, then we'll tighten them down with our impact. All right, now we need to re-secure the ground wire from the ECU back onto the negative terminal. Just take your nut, just put that on there, and tighten it down. Now go ahead and re-secure the cables for the ECU. Now we're going to put the battery back in. Always connect the negative terminal first, then the positive. Then we're going to tighten them down. All right, now we put this in to keep the battery in place. Start it with your fingers. And take your 13 millimeter, tighten it down. All right, now we're gonna put this air duct back in. Now, you'll have your hood latch in here. Just want to make sure that you get this in. All right, we're going to put this bolt back in and then tighten it down with an 8 millimeter socket. Okay. Last thing, we need to reattach the intake hose. And then tighten them down with the 7 millimeter. All right, now that we got everything back together, let's go ahead and fire it up and see how it sounds. So this concludes the video on how to install the ATP high flow catted downpipe onto the 1.4 liter turbocharged engine. If you're interested in purchasing this for your vehicle, you can do so directly on our website at ngencustoms.performance.com. And if you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any future install videos or awesome Abarth content. And until next time, I'm out.